Thank you so much for coming back and checking out our last addition to the LT4 Porkapotamus. We are finally, after months, ready to put the blower on there. And this is what we've all been waiting for. Everything is kind of led up to this. We've got a lot of help from Andy at ADM, and we've got his blower kit here, and we are going to show you what it takes to put it on. Thus far, with our Escalade, we have done AFE cold air intake, we've ported the intake manifold, we've got Fasterproms ported cylinder heads on there, Texas speed camshaft, 1 7/8 inch headers, and factory muffler. And so far we've put down 475 in 4th gear, which is not necessarily the optimal gear for this car, but pretty much what we're doing is when we dyno the car, we're setting up the car for 4th gear is what we're going to spend the most time in a quarter mile. So we got 475 wheel horsepower and 474 torque. But right now we're going to add on our 1.7 liter blower that comes native in the LT4 Corvette. So what comes in a 2015 on up C7 Z06. That is the blower that we're going to be putting on the car. Fasterproms, our company, has ported this blower, and we have Andy from ADM's supercharger pulley that is going to be able to give us as much boost as we can possibly make with this setup. We are maintaining the lower crank balancer, so we're not overdriving it to the absolute max, but with the upper pulley, we are running that one to the max. We're hoping for about 8 to 9 pounds of boost, and we're going to see what it makes with that. But we're hoping for somewhere in the neighborhood of about 175 horsepower and about 200 pound-feet of torque. Now, there are certain concessions of what we are going to make with this car. Ideally, we'd like to see a low 11, really a 10-second pass out of it. Doesn't everybody? That's kind of the benchmark that everybody wants to hit, or everybody wants to make 1,000 horsepower. We're not doing that with this, but a 10-second pass on a 5,500 pound car seems reasonable. So we are going to do some things with wheels, and we are going to do a number of things that are going to make the car conducive to cutting a pretty decent drag time where we can get a good 60 foot, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that we're not going to do. We're not going to gut it. We're not going to be taking crazy, concessions. Pretty much, if you had your wife and kids' car, how far would you go with that? Now, different answers are going to go to, different directions, but this really is just a baby hauler and a puppy mobile and a grocery getter. So that's what it is. We're not going to be doing absolutely crazy things that, some of you might suggest, but we are trying to maintain the best overall drivability, which has, for the most part, been maintained. Some of you might look at me as being a little bit crazy for doing this to my wife's daily driver as is, and perhaps there is some merit to that. But we're not going to be gutting it, and we're not going to be doing, like taking the air conditioning off, or putting Lexan windows or carbon fiber body panels on it. But we are going to get as much low-hanging fruit as we can out of it. All right, so we have all of our parts laid out, and we're going to systematically go through them on the instructions there. Look at this super nice pulley right there. Actually, we need to measure this pulley and find out what size this was. Was this, did we ever do that, or was that a 2.4? All right, we'll check that out. So we got our LT4 pump, we got our idlers, and it shows us how we set that all up right there. But everything in this kit from ADM has been addressed. It is so comprehensive. So these are our spacers that allow us, and this is actually completely brilliant the way that he's done this, is that this spaces the blower up and out of the way for some of the other components like the water pump. So that would have been an issue that you would have had to address, but because he raises up the blower, it kind of gets out of the way of some of those other components. So we just measured this pulley. We got a 235 out of this pulley. So we should be able to, we're going to see what kind of boost it makes. A lot of times people don't realize that boost is merely a measure of backup of pressure. So we've got really good free-flowing heads. We've got a decent sized camshaft in there. We've got a big header. If we had been missing any one of those components, we would probably make a little bit more boost. But ideally, we would like to make as much airflow as possible, naturally aspirate it, and then we build boost on top of that. Look at this big monster sitting right here. It's pretty darn impressive. It's definitely front and center, very exposed. The Porkapotamus is exposing itself with this large member. At this point, we're just kind of test fitting the blower. A lot of times with adapter plates, people talk about, hey, how they don't line up exactly. These adapter plates do match up very, very nicely exactly to the port of what is in there. No reason to modify it in any way, shape, or form. It does line up quite nicely. All right, we have our update. We are kind of getting a little bit closer here, just taking our time, doing what we can
to test fit everything. We have our heat exchanger right down in there. We're going to try and position it a little bit lower to get a little bit more airflow. Andy suggests that we delete this front louver deal right here. All right, this louver right here closes at a given temperature and kind of helps regulate almost thermostatically. I also think it has something to do with the fuel mileage as far as drag and such. So we are trying to get a good position for our heat exchanger. We get the bumper off. We're kind of looking at every little component, seeing what we can optimize. So we had found out that there is a restrictor on the feed side of the high pressure pump. So this is the inlet going through our flex fuel sensor right there. And down in here, there is a restrictor. So we're going to remove that. I believe we're going to run into a limitation of fuel when we get to E85. We should be good on pump gas, even with a stock injector, stock low and stock high pressure pump, but hopefully we'll be able to flow enough on E85. If the low side feeds enough to the high side will be able to supply everything that it needs, even on E85.
Somebody had commented on one of our prior videos with the Porkapotamus about the wheels, and they've said, hey, you should talk to Tony at NorCal SS. And I was like, oh man, I go back with Tony a little bit. So turns out he actually has the fastest Escalade as well, and he sells a whole bunch of parts for the Escalade. But that is the mark that we're shooting for. Apparently Tony went 1172 at 118, and we are going to be gunning for that. That is a very decent record with what he has, but what it's going to take from us, dotting our I's and crossing our T's, it's going to take every little thing in order to get this thing totally optimized. So one of the things that we had found out also when we were looking at the induction was that there is somewhat of a small restriction on the air inlet. So right down in here, we see that we're going to outline that, and we're going to cut that out because we don't want any restriction on the airflow that's coming in here. This big fat Porkapotamus is going to have a major demand for airflow. And we have a lot of drivetrain that's going to be eating up a lot of power, but anything and everything that we can possibly do to help feed good airflow to this Porkapotamus, she's going to eat it up. We're going to address the cold air limit, and we're going to address the fuel restriction. So hopefully between those two, we'll be able to support more E85 and just better, higher quality airflow. So not just cooler temps, but more of it at that.
Hey, let me show y'all something in here. I want to show you a little tuning secret. Down in here. There we go, we got our hole. Moving right along. The factory throttle body right there is 87 millimeters, and what we've done here is we've ported this one out to 102. A lot of times this can be the restriction in the whole induction track, so we're really going to try and feed this a little bit larger later. But this is just in preparation for another larger throttle body that we're going to do later on down the road. So this flange right here is an adapter that Andy's designed so that you can kind of clock the throttle body facing up rather than one side or the other for obvious reasons here. But that works. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, we're wrapping it up here for the night. We got a couple of things just wanted to kind of show you. All right, so we have our reservoir mounted at the moment, kind of mounts on the brake booster right there. This is getting ready to go in to our pump, which is down here. We're going to find a place to mount that. We might do a different reservoir in the future, but that is an awesome one that came with the kit right there. We're quite pleased with the way that that looks. It was super clean, just in and down. We got modified our cold air. This is another thing. So this was the AFE cold air, and what we did is we cut it, and he gave us the couplers right here. So we're really excited that way that's going to work right there. We had cut out that right there. We've got our routing all set up here for the blower. Kind of just test fitting a few more things. We were going to run our thermal plates on top, which are right in between here, that provide an additional heat barrier in between the blower and the aluminum from the cylinder head. So the cylinder head kind of gets hot, it transfers heat through the aluminum and into there. So what we're doing is we put our part right in there that does act as a heat barrier for that, thus making the blower more efficient. So we got a list of things that we need to do tomorrow, things that we're going to address. Might use that expansion tank. Just a couple small little hiccups here and there, but for the most part, we are wrapping it up for the night. Gonna get some rest, hit it back in the morning. All right, so we're making some big progress here. We've got our blower is now final mounted. We had to do a little bit of relief right there on the back of the, well, right at the top of the firewall right there. Had to cut out some of the insulation. I had to modify the lid. So if you check out right here, we have a very limited amount of space, and when we stick this blower lid down in there, there's really not a lot of space, and it's almost impossible to get to that back bolt right there. So what we had to do is we had to kind of make our little relief on the lid right there. That is one of the small number of things that we have to do. Right now we're mounting the heat exchanger pump. We've got our routing figured out on how we're going to do it. We got our final routing mounted for the heat exchanger, which looks pretty freaking sweet behind there. We're going to see what it looks like behind the grill in a little bit. That's going to be pretty interesting, almost like a front mount intercooler on the Porkapotamus Escalade. Porkapotamus Escalade. It's now a coined.
I just call it Porky.
Dun, dun, dun. Here it is. We are now. It's like. It is now an Escalade V. It's a Porkapotamus Escalade V. That's what it is. It is now official. We can put a V badge on it. It's worth about 50 horsepower. It's probably going to piss off every possible V owner out there, and we will shame them with our very large, very overweight Porkapotamus. We are getting so close here. We're getting so close. This thing is really looking about the way that it's going to look. It's starting to shape up quite nicely. This thing looks like it was designed to be in here. I'm really pleased with the way that it turned out. This is a genius design of the way that we had the throttle body clocked. Just had to kind of stick it sideways, and we should have good hood clearance. We haven't closed the hood yet, but I believe we're going to be totally fine. Referencing right here on the boost side makes all the difference in the world. If we have a like a Whipple or some other aftermarket blower, you want to reference the boost side rather than the vacuum side. We are just a couple minutes away from firing this up the first time here. Kind of wanted to go over all the little things that we had to do in order to make this work. So one of the things that is not normally on the kit is we modified our cold air that was already here, and it just barely fits. I think I almost cut off a little bit too much, but we are right at the limit there. Andy did include 2 of these couplers, which was quite nice of ADM to include that, so that is meant to go with the OEM cold air intake, but we made that work. A lot of interesting small things that you kind of would overlook when you would start this project. So down on the water pump, we had to remove the water temperature sensor, and we stuck that on the side of the block. It's just an adapter that works really nice, and you stick the sensor down in there. Even has an extension harness. Our firewall clearance was particularly bad on our setup because not only are we using his adapter plates, we're using our thermal plates in order to kind of minimize the heat transmission from the aluminum to the blower. So we even took a bolt down here, kind of cut that a little bit shorter. We had showed you a little bit earlier what we had done with the lid and had to kind of cut a little relief there. Kind of all our other sensors are retained. Our map sensor and our evap sensor are retained. They work in exactly the same spot. The kit that ADM offers, when we had kind of showed you guys the lines for the intercooler system, was top notch. I mean, everything is very well laid out. He has an adapter plate that goes right on to the brake booster. I mean, it looks OEM. Everything is nice, painted black, either wrapped OEM wise. It is a very clean setup. Everything went together so nice and smooth, really. So we got from the reservoir going into the intercooler pump down into our heat exchanger right here. Gives us all the stuff that we needed right there, coming back to the supercharger and repeating. All right, a common question of what we'll get is whether you're adapting an LSA or an LT4 to a vehicle that it did not come native in, you do not have to run the boost solenoid. So this is the bypass valve, this is the boost solenoid. This is electronically controlled and gives input to the ECM. There's a number of reasons when and why the ECM might bleed off some of the pressure to open the bypass valve in order to bleed off boost. You know, for example, if it's you got a traction control issue or something that came on, it's going to cut boost. Or if it's seeing too much load and it's not programmed right, you know, it would also cut boost. But
pretty much what we're gonna do is just take this off. You're not gonna use this, and just throw it away. So we're not running that here at all right now. We don't need it. This is something that you would use on an OEM setup that it came native in, but not on a swap. So our bypass valve, as it sees zero vacuum, it shuts, and it allows us to make boost. Now, if you have a very poor induction, it is going to see a lot of vacuum. So just as you are dependent on this closing and giving you a lot of boost, if this sees too much vacuum in the induction, particularly higher in the RPMs, it will open the bypass valve and you will lose boost, and it will almost appear as if you're having belt slippage. Recently, I just had a car with a magnet charger on a LT4 Z06 making very decent power, and it appeared as though we were having belt slippage up top, but we didn't see any belt dust or anything like that. All we did is we changed the reference from the vacuum side to the boost side, and we picked up over 60 wheel horsepower up top because we were able to make more boost. You guys put a supercharger on this thing? I don't even hear it yet. To some of the people on our last, all right, so hey, y'all check out my finger here, all right? So actually when I was about 11 years old, I broke the hell out of this, and I think I've had surgery on it 3 times, so no, it doesn't bend. Yes, call me Captain Hook, whatever you want to do, but this doesn't bend. I've had multiple screws and pins in it, and there you have it. That's the story on how I got the messed up finger, so. All right, we're gonna go take the Porkapotamus out for a first little test drive, kind of make sure everything's okay, and just trying to fix any bugs if we happen to find anything. But just want to get a rough feel for it. I kind of put a bass tune in there, just trying to make sure that everything is going to be good and safe. Not bad. It's shutting the throttle. I think it spun the tires on the, yeah, it definitely tripped traction control right there. That was like not even trying, really. That's like effortless. That's pretty good. I think the Porkapotamus turned into like an angry rabid bobcat or something. Oh boy, we're gonna need to upgrade the brakes on this thing. It definitely makes it feel like you just took about 1,000 pounds off of it. Yeah.
You're spinning all over
just
the
spun all over. Yeah, that was pretty easy.
Oh, that's funny.
We're gonna need some drag radials too. Yeah. It's it tingles me in special spots. All right, so from what we just felt on that test drive, this thing is going to be a monster on the dyno. I mean, that was the starting super conservative. I don't know what the air fuel or timing is going to be. I know that I put a really conservative timing figure in there, so it should have a lot of room to grow. Stay tuned for the next dyno video. So we're gonna see what this thing does, how much boost it makes, you know, what kind of bottom end torque, what kind of top end horsepower, intake air temperatures, all those kind of good pieces of information. This is a super efficient blower, and I can't wait to see what this thing is gonna make. Please check out the link below for some of our merchandise. Thank you so much for watching and being able to support us to be able to do stuff like this so that you guys can learn from our mistakes and all sorts of other things that we do, good and bad. Thank you so much. God bless you guys. Thanks for watching. See ya. Okay, so one of Norman's favorite things in the whole world is like a new stuffed animal. We call them his babies, okay? And oftentimes I want to give them to him, but I'm very reluctant because the other dogs get them, they just tear them apart into, you know, millions of little pieces, and there's little foam pieces all around the house. But let's go give it to him. Norman, look what I got. Oh. Penelope's gonna try and get it. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Oh, Norman. Yes. So. No.